Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Educ Show. I am your host, Educ Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and you'll get notified when I post content each and every week. My guest today is Jade Stevens. She is the board president of 40 Acre Conservation League in Northern California. The Black-led nonprofit aims to foster a greater human connection to nature and to increase community support for its protection. Jade is an experienced marketing specialist, professional in both the public and private sectors. She has expertise in public relations, crisis communications, event planning, philanthropy, and social media management. And I'm very happy to be able to speak with her today. Jade, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
It's a much needed conversation. So let's get into it. First of all, tell me about 40 Acre Conservation League. Why was it created? What are some of the goals and what is your mission?
Yeah, you gave a great intro. The 40 Acre Conservation League is one of the first Black-led nonprofit land conservancies in California. And we were formed with the goal of fostering the greater human connections that we know exist when it comes to nature so that we can increase that community support for its protection, but also just the enjoyment of the outdoors. Our vision and mission is really centered where we can achieve an outdoor that is welcoming for everyone. And the way that the 40 Acre Conservation League does that is really centered around three pillars. And I like to think of it in a way where to achieve that mission, one is we're really focused on finding ways to maximize exposure to nature and eliminating land use practices that don't necessarily benefit us. And that's environmental justice for us. The second is maximizing participation in the outdoor recreation. So, really going to places that are inclusive, safe, and accommodating. And that's recreational justice. And finally, we know that the conservation industry, the outdoor industry, if we want to be real, is a big business, but we don't see people of color benefiting economically the way that they should as others do. And that is really economic justice. And that's what really guide us, those three pillars: environmental justice, recreational justice, and economic justice.
It's interesting you mentioned the numbers of African American participation because the most recent census survey found that less than 3% of foresters and conservation scientists identify as African American. What steps are you taking to try to maybe increase participation in addition to your group? And why do you think it's been so low?
Yeah, I mean, when we saw those numbers, we were quite surprised that the number was low, but also not at the same time. And so I think the reality is being a forester, working in this industry, there are quite a few licenses, credentials, and training that you need to be qualified to work on larger projects. And so being aware of what is expected when working on those projects is, I think, one huge barrier. But I think the way that 40 Acre Conservation League addresses that is finding ways to bring on more foresters that are qualified and are people of color to work with us on projects. I know we're going to talk about the land that we have now in Immigrant Gap, but because you asked me, we've definitely had conversations with Black foresters who are extremely qualified. One guy that works with us on our current property has done work in Alaska, and he's been out there doing the work. And so we really do the due diligence to find as many entrepreneurs of color in this space that we can help, not help, but bring along with us on our project so that we can increase that number, year over year.
Before we take a deeper dive into your land acquisition, which is very exciting, very interesting, and I really want to get into that. Um, can you just speak to the natural beauty of open land in Northern California and why it should be protected for future generations?
Yeah, I mean, California as a state is beautiful, but when we're talking about Northern California, well, let me back up. California really is beautiful in the sense of it has the most state and national parks in the country. And 100 of those state parks are based in Northern California. So for me, someone who's an outdoor enthusiast that rides my bikes, goes on hikes, that camps, there's really something for anyone to enjoy when we're talking about the unique landscape in Northern California, from going for a great hike, just taking in the view, or even visiting some of the natural national parks that are in the area. There's just so much when it comes to history and views. Some of the parks that are probably most familiar to many is Yosemite National Park, which is home to the largest and oldest trees in the world. It's certainly popular on social media. So is the Sequoia National Park, which has the large sequoias, and then the Tahoe National Forest, which has Lake Tahoe and is actually bordering where our first land acquisition is. So plenty to see from lakes to mountain views to valleys. There's certainly something for everyone.
So with that as a backdrop, no pun intended, let's get into your recent acquisition. Your organization just bought about 650 acres in Placer County. What's the significance of that acquisition, and why do you specifically target that area?
Yeah, so we're so proud to have been able to acquire 650 acres of land in what is called Immigrant Gap. I mentioned that it borders the Tahoe National Forest, but just those 650 acres alone, there's so much landscape to take in. There's forest, right? So when you think about forests, people imagine these large, humongous trees, and they have trees that are, wide and as tall as can be. And so when we were exploring this, we saw old growth, new trees, and they're all extremely close to each other. And so that was like the first thing that we realized, that we'd have to bring on a team to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to maintain the forest health and restore it. But there's so much plant life there that you could get lost in, for those that are into it, just really taking in all of the different plant life that exists. In terms of, animals, there's certainly a couple of mountain lions. I'm sure I saw a few bears out there, but the most interesting thing that I saw was the unbelievable amount of bees and butterflies that are out there. Some of those are actually endangered, and we're looking into those certain species in ways that we can not only conserve the land, but also create a habitat that protects these pollinators that play such a huge part in the maintenance of our food and everything else that goes into that. And then if you can imagine, there's, hundreds, maybe even thousands of miles of land that can be turned into trails for hiking. But for those of you that are into, ATVing or any of those, off the highway vehicles, there's certainly an opportunity to do that. And then finally, we have a 30-acre lake, which is Lake Putt for those of you that are familiar with the area, and it's visible from the freeway. So as you are driving from Sacramento, I should mention this land is about an hour from Sacramento. If you're taking the 80 freeway, you can literally see the land as you're driving by. And the first thing you'll see is Lake Putt, which is 30 acres of water. And we're looking into ways that we can restore recreation in that area by bringing people to hang out, whether it's through a nature center or a lodge, or even fishing at some point. And so the last part of your question is, how did we choose this piece of land? My board and I, we've had all conversations around, one, how can we maintain and conserve the land, but how can we make it more accessible to people of color and really just communities in general? And so the way that we pinpoint areas that we want to access or to go after when it comes to parcels of land is, we really want to choose locations that are within 150 miles of an urban city or an urban setting. So, thinking about major cities like Sacramento, but that could also broaden us out to Bay Area, San Jose, Los Angeles, San Diego, because we think of this as, someone who's, kind of on the fence about enjoying the outdoors. They're more likely to go somewhere where, you can think of it as like a weekend trip or just like a quick day trip, right? And so 100 miles from a major city kind of ensures that you can get there within, 2 to 3 hours and stay if you want, or go back home after a good day outside.
We often think of economic benefits to things like land, but there are some actual health benefits and just I guess you would say um, good vibes about being out in the
Definitely.
wilderness. As someone who's an outdoor enthusiast, maybe you can speak to some of that aspect of being outdoors and encompassing nature.
Sure. I mean, there's plenty of studies and reports that, really credit going outside to restoring and really maintaining your mental health. Being in a place where you're around nature, being able to kind of get away from the hustle and bustle of, a loud day in the city, it's really peaceful. And that really speaks to your mental health. I know there are other reports that have really shown, having access to, cleaner air, being around just a more, I'd say like, what's the word? Not as noisy, like a noise pollutant. It really helps you seek a sense of clarity. And for me, as a cyclist, someone that is often doing, anywhere from 30 to 70 miles in a ride, that's about 3 to 4 hours where I'm outside riding along coastlines, riding through, trails like Immigrant Gap. And it certainly has helped me physically and mentally when it comes to just enjoying the views.
There's a long history of African Americans in Placer County. It's not widely known, and other mining regions around California. Um, and I encourage folks to go back and read a lot of the Alta California editorials. I mean, there's a deep, rich history of African Americans in the Gold Rush era, and actually led to some of the conversations around why this state was a free state and not a slave state. That's a whole nother story. But given that there is that historical presence of African Americans in Placer County, how is your organization reflecting that history? And what are you doing to protect the legacy of the African American mining community?
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring that up. The land in Immigrant Gap has quite a few historical connections to the state of California. And the short answer really is, in addition to conserving and maintaining the land, we are very focused on programming that can educate not only communities of color who are not as comfortable with enjoying the outdoors, but really showing how Black history, different stories all played a part into what created California today. And so as we continue to plan out the recreational uses of not just this land, but future land, we will definitely be incorporating educational tours, ways for us to share like what is on the property. An interesting thing that we found out is that before we were, I don't want to say directly after, but before we owned the land, it was actually owned by the Central Pacific Railroad, which was given to them by the federal government. And the Central Pacific Railroad was part of completing that first transcontinental railroad. And that rail line still runs through our site today. And so, what that means is when you think about the Central Pacific coastline and I'm sorry, Central Pacific Rail Line, thinking about how they've been able to, maintain this generational wealth through this business, through the railroad company. It's quite interesting to see now that we own the land following that. And just those historical points, I think, not only makes us proud, but also, again, shows how we are a part of history and how we are moving it forward to be more inclusive.
I have a question about your team, but before I get to that, I did notice a program you have called Loyal to the Soil. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit. What is that about?
Yeah, so that was the theme for our Black Conservation Week that we did in 2023. And that week was really dedicated to really showing and spotlighting the importance of understanding how the Black community is a part of the conservation space. And so we spent time talking to our legislators and advocates to really talk about how policies that need to be put in place to increase the opportunities for organizations like 40 Acre Conservation League, right? We don't want to be the only Black-led land conservancy in the space looking to go out and, acquire land to maintain land. And so Loyal to the Soil is really an essence of, one, reminding us as Black people that we've always been a part of the outdoors. I have land in my family in the South, right? I found out that my great-great-grandparents still own land in Shreveport, Louisiana, and they've passed it down to us. There's certainly a lot of figures in California, Black figures that own land. And there's even a growing homestead movement where Black families are thinking about how can we really live off the land and really maintain it for ourselves, right? And so all of these different conversations that are happening didn't start with us. These are things that have been going on for forever, for years. And so we really wanted to bring that conversation to Sacramento during Black Conservation Week to help them understand that we do have a voice and there's a place for us when we're talking about the state's goals, which we didn't really get into, but their 30 by 30 initiative, which is to protect 30% of the state's land and waterways by 2030. It's important for when we put these goals in place, it's important for them to understand what that means for each community and really finding ways to connect with us in a way that matters. And so loyal to the soil is really a way, is our take with helping our legislators and really anyone that is in the conservation space understand how we play a part in that as well.
You have a very passionate team around you, a team of talented and just excellent folks. Talk to me about your team, their passion, and their commitment to the cause.
Yeah, I mean, I have a great board that works with me and an even larger team of scientists and experts that are helping bring our vision to life. I'll start with myself. I've said already that, I've started I was really brought to this by my experiences when I was cycling. I've, had the opportunity to ride along the coastline. I've ridden from downtown Los Angeles to San Diego, and I've gone the opposite on bike, going all the way up to Santa Barbara, and again, rode around Northern California. And I just, as someone who really loves the outdoors, whenever I would invite my friends of color, they would be like, I don't know if I'm trying to go to the Tahoe Park, or I don't know if, people like me can stay overnight in Yosemite. But in the same conversation, we're making plans to go to the Caribbean, to jump off of waterfalls and go kayaking. And I was like, you guys, there's something here that I don't understand. Why is it that we're willing to fly thousands of miles and spend hundreds, thousands really of dollars to go have these, outdoor experiences in Mexico and the Caribbean, everywhere except for somewhere in California where it's free? Help me understand that. And it really just came down to, the same conversations of not feeling welcome, not seeing someone that looks like me at these parks, not knowing what is available at these parks. So I'd rather go somewhere where I see people that look like me than going somewhere that's literally in my backyard or an hour away from Los Angeles, right? And so my board, we all come from different backgrounds. None of us have started in conservation. My background, as you mentioned, is in marketing. I have a board member whose background is in real estate, someone else in finance, public affairs. And I think our collective, brain power saw the opportunity in conservation to really do what we would call is modernizing the Green Book, where we can find and identify places that are welcoming for people who are interested in enjoying the outdoors, but not really sure where it's safe, right? Like, let's be real, in Northern California and, throughout the country, there are still areas that we still see Confederate flags. We still see areas where people are, talking about separating the state, and moving into, more conservative areas. And there's really nothing wrong with different ideologies. It really just comes down to being safe. And so that passion is what has driven us to really find our lane in conservation.
On a personal note, you mentioned you like cycling and outdoors. Where did that love come from? Where did that start?
A funny story. It started in 2020. My sorority sister gave me her bike. She wasn't using it. And, as many, people who found themselves, at home or having a little extra time on their hands due to the pandemic, I found the bike during that time and, started to do, short local group rides, in my neighborhood. And I'm just a naturally competitive person. The group rides weren't enough for me. Suddenly I was faster than the group ride. And then it became a challenge of how far can I ride, which is what led me to do, 100+ miles in a day. It's what led me to ride to Santa Barbara, in one day. And, it just became a progression opportunity for me to continue to grow. And so I still do it regularly. I ride, very often during the week, and I even race now in local racing, regional races.
As we get ready to wrap up, have just a couple more minutes left, but what's next on horizon for 40 Acre Conservation League? What are you guys, what is the next big initiative you guys are working on?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a big misconception that being awarded the $3 million by the state of California to purchase the land, that 650-acre land in Immigrant Gap, the misconception is that, everything is done, right? Once we are awarded that. But that really
Right.
is just the beginning. And so that funding was meant to purchase the land. But all of the things that we talked about today, from identifying recreational opportunities. How can we get a nature center on the property? How can we bring fish to the land or to the lake so people can, fish? How do we maintain and protect the bees and butterflies that we found and create a really sustainable pollinator habitat? All of that requires additional funding, additional planning, and a team to actually do that. And so that's where we're spending the first half of this year, really putting the plans into place and carrying that out so that those that have told us regularly that they can't wait to see the property, we want them to know, like, we want you there too. But a big part of it is really just doing our due diligence to research the land, survey the land, see, what needs to be restored and what can we do realistically when it comes to the recreational side, but we're also actively looking for new land to acquire too. That formula that I mentioned earlier, finding land that's within 150 miles from major cities, we're still actively looking for more land to acquire, and we'll continue to do that in the near future.
Well, Jade, you and your board and your organization are doing some very interesting work in a space that you're actually going into new spaces, if I can say it that way. I think it's definitely needed. I think what you guys are doing is bringing not just a historical approach to this, but also highlighting the benefits of open space and conservation. And as you mentioned, not just for people of color, but for all people. So I want to applaud you for foraging out into this world, especially in Northern California, which is such a beautiful area. My wife and I just drove up to Reno a few months ago
Yeah.
from here in the Bay Area, and it was absolutely spectacular. So, congratulations. Good luck on your future endeavors with your organization. If people want more information about you or more information about your organization, where can they go?
Yes, thank you. You can sign up for our newsletter and see our updates on our website, which is 40acreleague.org. You can also follow us on all of the social platforms. Our handle is 40 Acre League, 40 Acre League.
Excellent. Jade Stevens, president of the 40 Acre Conservation League in Northern California. Thank you so much for appearing on the Edric Show.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. This has been another edition of the Edric Show. As promised, intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. You will get notified of content I post each and every week. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode.